Now let's take a look at how we can use cloners with a spline effector so that the little aliens can move along a particular path. So we've got, again, back to our 4 models here. So the first thing we'll do is drop in a cloner, and let's add these to the cloner just as before. So we've now got all of these inside of our cloner. The next thing we'll do is come to the top view. Let's kind of zoom out a little bit. I'm just going to draw out a simple path from the top view that I want these to flow along. We can come in here and use one of these spline creation tools here. So you can click to create points with some of these. If you just choose a freehand, though, we can just sort of draw it out. So we come over here, back here, and then straight off this way. You can see it creates the points there. We can go to a rectangle selection. We can go to the Use Point tool and select the points and begin to move those. You can see that this particular spline is a Bezier because we have the Bezier handles. If we select the spline, you can see the type here. If you'd like to change the type, you can click on this and you can choose different types. Linear would be just straight lines between the points. Cubic, you can see the points are still on the lines, but we don't have the handles. Okay, if you wanted to do a B-spline, kind of like a NURBS, then you'd have your points sort of off of the surface. So depending on how you want to start to manipulate this, you can change that to a different type. I'm just going to choose the cubic, and I'm just going to kind of smooth it out a little bit. So maybe something like that. All right. And kind of move our camera around. So now we'd like to clone the objects not based on a line or even a grid, but we'd like to clone them along a spline. So to do that, we can add a special effector. So we're going to go over to Effectors. We've got our cloner selected. Let's go to MoGraph, Effector, and let's choose a Spline Effector. So now you can see that that effector has been added. We need to go into the Spline Effector, and we need to add our spline. Let's actually name this so it's very clear. We'll just call this Path. So we need to input into the Spline Effector the actual spline that we want to use, and that's going to be located right in here. Now, whenever we're doing this, all we have to do is just click and drag this down into that path. And you can see already we've got now some clones along this particular spline. Let's go into the cloner now, go back to Object, and right now the count is set to 3. So if we take a look at this, there are only 3 clones. So what we want to do is increase the number of clones. So let's say we want them to be kind of spaced out like that. Now you can see right now that they're sort of upside down based on the way that we drew them. So one of the ways to change this is to go into the Spline Effector, and there's an up vector here, and in the Y I'm just going to set that to 1, and that'll flip those over. Okay, so we've got the count, but we want them to now flow along the path or the spline. So what setting do we need to change to do this? Well, that's going to be in the Spline Effector, and that's going to be the offset. So you can see from 0, that's where they start, and if I just dial this offset up, they're just continue to flow along, which is what we want. Now right now they're flowing along in a very straight line. Okay, they're very close to one another. I want to add a little bit of randomness to this, so we'll go to Effectors, and let's add another random effector. Now in this random effector, we'll change some of these values. So we can change the positions. So I'm going to change the X position. Let's also change the Y position a little bit so that they're a little bit more off. They're not completely lined up. Okay, and I'm not going to change the Z too much because I don't want them to be kind of right on top of each other, but something like that will work. Okay, get our camera kind of down here. Maybe take the Y down a little bit. Okay, now we can animate this as well. So we come in here, and let's say that we want them to just start flowing past us. We'll choose the Spline Effector. We'll key the offset, so Control, click on the offset at frame 0. And then I've got this set to 360 frames, but you can set that to whatever you like. We'll go to 360, and let's increase that offset. We'll just take it to 100 and see what that looks like. Control, click on the little dot, and that'll add 2 keyframes well, that'll add 1 keyframe, but we'll have 2 total. And so now when you dial through this, you can see that. Let's go into our random and let's add a little bit of rotation. So I want to add a little bit of rotation. It's kind of like that, so that they're not completely straight. But you can see that the randomness of this stays the same throughout. And so another thing that we could do would be to maybe key this. So we could key the position and rotation, and then maybe do it the other way and key those. Maybe those flow out a little bit more, just to give us a little bit of movement there. So it's not completely steady. So they're moving a little bit. So there you can see we've taken 4 simple objects. We've added them to a cloner. So we've cloned them along a spline that we've created. So we drew out the spline path. And then all we have to do is use a spline effector, kind of put that into the cloner along with the random effector. And then inside of the spline effector, we use the spline. So you can really start to build up some interesting things here with some very simple shapes that we've drawn out, put them inside of a cloner, and then just one other spline that we created. So this is a lot of, Cinema 4D is used a lot for broadcast and moving things around, broadcast elements and things like that. And so, these kinds of tools are going to be really helpful for you as you go through your work in Cinema 4D. So in the next lesson, let's take a look at something a bit different. So we'll actually go into some polygon modeling. So we've been using mainly splines and generators. Let's actually look at building a polygon model and working with that in the next lesson.